Hi, I'm David Silverman, President of American Atheists, and thank you for joining us on Atheist Viewpoint today. Today we're going to have an interview by Blair Scott with Joe Nickell. Now, Joe Nickell is probably the only full-time professional paranormal investigator in the country. He works for SciComm and the Skeptical Inquirer, and he's got some pretty interesting things to say. So sit back. This was taped at Skepticon last month. It's a good interview. Blair Scott interviewing Joe Nickell. Thanks, and have a great day.
We're at Skepticon 3 in Springfield, Missouri, and joining us is Joe Nickell with the CSI. What does that stand for?
Well, not crime scene investigation
Right.
like you see on your TV. This is Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, publishers of Skeptical Inquirer Science Magazine. And I travel around the world investigating strange mysteries at the fringes of science.
And one of the things I've heard you say before is that you don't like the term debunking, that you actually do something else. Can you explain it? What is it that you do? It's not debunking,
It's investigating. I'm actually a former investigator with a world-famous detective agency. And, you know, the difference is that if you say you're a debunker, it sounds like you've started with a conclusion.
Right.
Like, that's silly. And imagine if a detective did that. Imagine if a detective came bursting in and he said, Lieutenant, there's been a shooting across town. The lieutenant said, yeah, probably another suicide. Put it down as a suicide. Right. And he says, but sir, he shot 3 times in the back. And the lieutenant says, yeah, very bad case of suicide. Right. Well, we wouldn't put up with that. Right. So why do it with the paranormal? I mean, it's right to be very, 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 very skeptical of things like haunted houses and flying saucers. And it's true that I've debunked more of those than maybe anyone. But that's after the fact. Right. So I'm just saying, let's not start with an attitude, let's open our minds, because it's not just an issue of whether there's a ghost or a flying saucer or not. It probably isn't. The question is, how do we explain that claim? Right. Those footsteps on the stairs, or that particular movement of a lake monster. What could that be? Okay, it's probably not a lake monster, but what is it? What is it? Yeah, is it maybe, you know, otters swimming in a line or something?
Right. So the process of investigation can lead to debunking, but you shouldn't start with the mindset of debunking. You should go into an investigation going, what's the natural explanation, with the possibility that there actually might be some type of paranormal going on.
It's always hypothetically possible. Science doesn't know everything, and we've not closed the book on all possibilities. But as I say, I'm very, very skeptical of all these things, right, for a good reason, because I've done this now for 40 years. So either is seeming less and less likely to find a real haunted house or something, or another interpretation. Of course, I'm not very good at this. Right. I'm just not good at that. That's the other interpretation. Maury Povich once said to me, I said something about on his show, I said something like, well, Maury, it seems like whenever I go into a haunted house, the ghosts must go out the back door. And Maury, who's nothing if not a smart aleck, said, well, Joe, maybe ghosts just don't like you. Right. Of course, that's another hypothesis.
I got invited to the Mobile Area Ghost Club. Magic is what they call themselves. And they invited me specifically because they wanted me to be the Scully to their Mulder. Mm-hmm. To which I quickly pointed out that Scully was a horrible skeptic, because she had tons of evidence put in front of her and she still refused to accept it. Yeah. You know, I didn't want to be the Scully to their Mulder, right? You know, the point is to go in and look at the evidence and draw the right conclusion, and not to ignore evidence. But I walked into the first haunted house they did, and they're using dowsing rods and stuff like that. I got them to admit that dowsing rods were bogus. They stopped using them. I got them to admit that thermal cameras didn't mean a thing. I got them to admit that high electromagnetic fields just meant there's 3 electrical cords running through the wall instead of 1. You know, I mean, so they at least admitted to some of that stuff. But when you go and compare the local groups that'll at least listen sometimes to all the shows that are on the History Channel, TLC, and Discovery, what used to be science channels, what are those guys doing wrong? I mean, in a sense, they're doing the same thing. Instead of starting off with the mindset of debunking,
they're all doing this. They're all on a fool's errand. And I say that. I know the famous ghost hunters. We had a beer summit once and made nice. They singled me out in an audience, and it could have turned on me. So I appreciate that I wasn't killed right there. But
those gangster ghost hunters, right?
and you know, they will be the first to question orbs. They know that orbs are, you know, these balls of light that you see in photographs are made with flash cameras, and that the flash is bouncing off of some little speck of dust.
Right.
And it looks like a big ball of light out in the room, but it's just a particle of dust or any of certain other things that can create illusions. But then they go on and are not skeptical of thermal imaging cameras and electromagnetic field detectors and EVPs and so forth. And the problem is that, first of all, they and most of their ilk are not scientists. And so the fact that they've got some scientific equipment from Radio Shack or somewhere, if they don't know really what they're detecting, then they're just incompetent to be doing it. They don't know what they're doing.
So just because you have scientific sounding words and you have scientific sounding equipment doesn't make you a scientist. Is that what you're saying?
In fact, we have a name for that which looks superficially like science, with the jargon and the trappings and so forth, but fundamentally is not science, and we call it pseudoscience.
Pseudoscience, exactly.
The problem is that there's just no evidence that ghosts exist, and that in any, even if they do, that they are quasi-physical. That is, when I say quasi-physical, well, they're not physical, so they can walk through a wall, right? But then, no, they're sort of physical because they leave heavy thudding footsteps and they show up as orbs and so on. Well, you can...
Which one is it, right?
You can only have things both ways and have all these contradictions, like they're fundamentally energy. Okay, so it's life energy, all right, but then why does the clothing show up? That's not living matter. Oh, well, don't ask too many questions. These contradictions can exist, of course, in the imagination, which is where it goes.
Well, it's funny you mentioned material things. Have you seen the recent information that came out of England about ghosts using cell phones to contact people? It was funded by a British telephone company, obviously. It was a PR stunt from the get-go. That's blatant, right? But they came out and said that there was a 70% upsurge in ghosts using cell phones to contact the living. And you know what it was is that people were going, well, yeah, I got this strange call, and there was just noise in the background. Because nobody's ever hip dialed me before where I've been able to listen to a background conversation. You know, that's never happened. You know.
Well, and this is the problem with ghost hunting, is that you have essentially glitch-prone equipment.
Right.
You have equipment that will do something, but the question is, okay, the needle's waving, or there's static or something, but what does that mean?
Right.
And I think the irony of a lot of ghost hunting, I dare to say, is that I think the ghost hunters in a lot of cases are simply detecting themselves.
Right.
You see you know, what was that? Well, some of your crew was maybe on the second floor.
Right.
Or, wow, look at that human-shaped, yeah, one of your guys was just standing over there. I duplicated this recently in an experiment where you have someone stand against a wall and then walk away, and then you take a thermal image picture, and it's amazing how you can pick up even fingers, and yet there's no one there.
Right.
And so on. There are famous cases with the ghost hunters of at the Myrtles Plantation, a lamp moving across a table in a spooky way, but you know, skeptical observers noticed that the cord was moving too. It seemed to be moving in the direction of the cord, and it's kind of, you know, was it an accident of someone's foot, or was it a deliberate subterfuge?
Or is there a ghost sitting there going, "Come,
exactly. And how do ghosts do that if they can walk right through a wall? How do they turn on the light switch?
Right.
But I've had the good luck many times in investigating hauntings to actually catch ghosts doing their light turning ons and offs and such things, but of course they were people playing at being ghosts. And
I mean, you can't really. I mean, is that technically fraud in the legal sense, or is
no? And skeptics need to be very careful about using what we call the F word. Right. We have a policy about not using the F word, fraud, because once you say, oh, that psychic, she's just a fraud, what you've just done is you've switched the burden of proof from she has to prove she's genuine to now you have to prove she isn't genuine, and it's very, very, very difficult to prove a negative in such cases. And besides, if she isn't taking money for it, if someone's doing something just because they believe in it and not charging money for it, then it is not legally fraud. And in any case, a lot of psychics and others are just self-deluded.
Right. They truly believe that they can do it.
Absolutely, they do. I've met them, and I believe that some of them really are sincere. They just start by fooling themselves, and then they fool other people.
I mean, do you think some people like maybe John, do you think John Edwards is sincere?
Well, now you put an S on it, so you're talking about the politician, but you mean John Edward.
Or John Edward, yes.
John Edward. His real name is John Edward McGee Jr. John Edward is a fast-talking, quick-witted, cold reader. Now, does he know what he's doing? I think so, because I was with I worked with the Dateline NBC, and we actually caught him cheating. So that's a pretty good indication, isn't it?
But he's not sincere.
We know that. No, it's hard to say in every instance, but I know of one instance where he used some information and pretended that he had just gotten it from the other world, and we knew for a fact that he got it hours earlier in the afternoon and was told this. So he tried to sort of weasel out of it, but didn't work for me.
So for skeptical groups that are starting on their own, avoid the use of the word fraud.
Absolutely.
Avoid any kind of legal entanglement that can get you in trouble for slander or libel. And maybe not go to the extreme and take the Penn and Teller approach, where instead of saying he's a fraud, he's a jackass. Where they use, call him nasty names instead of using his words.
Be kind when you can. I've seen skeptics, just because someone claimed to have seen a lake monster, I've seen skeptics go, or, and I wish they would stop doing that. Only if they know something, if they've done a thorough investigation and prepared to prove something, then they can. Otherwise, it's just debunking, and it's the worst kind of debunking. It's character assassination. It's ad hominem. It's not got anything to do with intelligence or anything. These are know-it-all people who are just out to make fun of other people. And so I say don't do it. I know for a fact that there are people who are sane, sober, intelligent, absolutely sincere, who have seen a long-necked, undulating, serpentine creature.
Right.
I'm pretty sure I know what they've seen, and I'll mention it in my talk. So they're mistaken, but they don't deserve any kind of mistreatment because they've actually seen something that looks just like they said, any more than you and I, if we saw something, would want people to say, well, you didn't really see a UFO. No, we did. We just don't know what it was. Maybe we
forgot what that U is in UFO.
Yes, unidentified.
I don't know what it is. I've actually seen a few of them during my lifetime, and the heavily reported flying cigar tube. I was in Mobile, and I looked to the northeast and saw one. I'm like, hey, wait a second, I've seen that on CSI back when you guys were CSI, and I've seen it on UFO shows on History Channel, and then it made a bank, and I saw the tail and the wings, and I'm like, that's amazing how that little bit of light reflection, I saw the shadow. The fuselage itself was in shadow, and that's all I saw. I couldn't see the tail or the wings or the nose cone, just a fuselage, and it looked exactly like every video I've ever seen of the flying cigar tube.
I once saw an airplane, and it was coming straight at me, so that what I saw the end of the fuselage, so it just looked, like around here, and then I saw the wings on either side. But if you think of the profile of the stereotypical flying saucer, it looks like a flying saucer.
Right.
And it's just interesting how we see something, and then our mind is trying to figure out what is that. We're doing that as we speak. What is that? And we can easily be mistaken.
And easily jump to the wrong conclusion.
Absolutely.
Easily jump to the wrong.
And some of this processing is being done at a very subconscious level, And so we see things that aren't really there. And we just need to know. It's what we should do, I think, when skeptics make fun of people. I think that what they do is they just look like mean-spirited sons of bitches. I don't think they may appeal to other mean-spirited sons of bitches as really great guys,
Right.
you know, but they're not going to appeal to anybody on the other side that they would like to convince. So what I try to do is just say, look, let's just respect people generally. I like to be respected. I respect you. Let's respect him. And if he's mistaken, well, then let's say
Point it out to him nicely.
Point it out to him. If he's nasty, well, okay, then maybe a zinger or one-liner is okay then.
Be a little snarky, but don't be nasty.
But the people, and I go after the fraud artists and the fakes and the real deliberate deceivers. When I know they're deceiving, I go after them pretty
when you can actually
vigorously.
prove fraud.
Right.
Okay.
Or even sometimes where I will go after someone who's maybe sincere, but is just so militantly misleading people and so impervious to any reason that person also deserves kind of public criticism and not kid gloves treatment. But certainly the little person, the person who's got a wood grain picture of Jesus on her door, I just think we oughtn't to be making fun of the person. We might make a little fun of the phenomenon in a kind of dispassionate circumstance where we're just talking about the phenomenon.
Right.
But as soon as a person's involved with it, then I think we ought to be kind so that we're seen to be decent, humanistic.
I see the difference. I tend to agree with you. I would never make fun of the person who saw Mary in her tortilla, but I would make fun of the tortilla.
Her.
You know, it'd be like,
well,
come on, Mother Mary has nothing better to do than show up in a tortilla in Guadalajara, Mexico. I mean, that's the best she can do.
Let me just say that of the famous case of Mrs. Rubio's holy tortilla, I was on Oprah once with her daughter, and her daughter mentioned this, and the audience kind of tittered and kind of laughed at her. And later in the green room, she was looking very dejected. Now she's just a simple girl.
Right.
She's perfectly sincere. She sat over there looking very sad and dejected. I went over there and cheered her up. I asked if I could look at her pictures. I showed interest in them. She said, you could come and visit. And so it was some years later that I showed up at her mother's house. Her mother couldn't speak much English.
Right.
I tried to convey your daughter and Oprah and so forth. I think she sort of got some of that. And she took me out to a little shed at the back of the house, and there it was, no longer really recognizable as much of anything. But a sweet woman. And okay, so she's very, very religious, and I'm not. Boy, am I not. And she's really superstitious and given to belief that she's, but she's a good person. She's not not evil. She's just wrong. And what would it make me if I were nasty to her?
Right.
Would I be a good person? I don't think so.
Yeah, in my day-to-day operations, the way I make the separation of who gets treated snarky and who doesn't is the difference between somebody like her, who's just a regular person, who's sincere in their beliefs and saw something unexplainable or has matrixed something into a tortilla or a wood panel or a tree, versus somebody who is trying to impose their beliefs on others. Mm-hmm. I'm a little snarkier with them because they're actually up to malintent. There's malice there.
I think you're doing okay if you do it that way. And so I have kind of a spectrum of how I treat people. Maybe I should say though, when I talk to particularly young skeptics and I say don't do this and don't do that and don't do the other, I like to, after a little while, I stop and say, I can speak with some authority on this. Right. They look at me like, okay. And I say, because I've made all those mistakes, you say. I did all those things. And they say, oh, and I say, so that's how I'm telling you. It doesn't work. It's not good. And then I say, there's worse news. Apparently, I'm not through doing it.
Right.
I occasionally lapse and blurt out something and I'm rude to somebody, and I shouldn't have been.
That's human nature.
So, but when I do, I'm sorry for it, and I just know from experience it doesn't work very well. If you're going to be out there and be on television and speak about these issues broadly, You can't afford the luxury of sounding like you're speaking to a little choir of atheists here, or
Right.
or skeptical debunkers. You need to speak broadly to a wide variety of people who some of whom you can influence if you come off as a respectful person with some facts and respect them. People will listen when you respect them. As soon as you're nasty, they just turn you right off.
Right.
And I do the same thing. When people are nasty to me, I don't listen to them. So I just know that's how we are.
Yeah, what we did is we actually separated out. We have a separate podcast for our nasty side, you know. And but that nasty podcast is not intended for people, for believers. It's not intended for non-skeptics and pseudoscientists. It is intended for people just like us. That's our audience. Mm-hmm. And so it's making fun of ourselves. It's making fun of the pseudoscience itself, but not the people, unless it's people that deserve the ridicule, like George Reckers. Come on, he walked right into that one. He deserved it, right? The rentboy.com guy. I don't know if you remember him. A huge anti-gay activist who got busted with the rentboy.com guy. And
oh yeah, it's vaguely coming back. Well, hypocrites of all stripes.
Right. He deserved to be laughed at. Right. So I mean, we pick and choose who we mock. But so we have a separate venue for that with a very targeted audience. It's kind of the difference between outreach and inreach. So when we're doing outreach, let's be respectful, let's be nice, let's be kind.
Absolutely.
But when you're talking to a group of your friends, that's a little different. But hopefully you'll continue to keep doing this. That you'll continue to do this. Your investigations that lead to debunking.
They'll take the magnifier from my cold dead hand, I hope.
That's a good bumper sticker.
Yeah, I should use that.
Yeah. Somebody's going to make a T-shirt out of that.
I'm hoping to keep at it. You see, the one thing we started talking about the debunkers, the debunking idea. I've watched debunkers come and go. After a while, they're not having any fun. They become more and more frustrated and strident. They just have to debunk that. There's another stupid, silly haunted house.
Too much stress.
And they just finally, it's called skeptical burnout.
Right.
I, on the other hand, am not. I mean, I get distressed that there's a lot of silliness in this taking over television. But when I look at a case, I think, well, that does have maybe an interesting feature. Wonder what could be causing.
So for you, it's not stress or it's not
there's
work.
An intellectual component.
So you see it as fun.
And furthermore, and this is when we're at our best, maybe we see one of these things not totally negatively as, oh, there's Bigfoot again. My good. No, we can actually say, we can do it this way. We can say, there's another opportunity for me to talk science.
Right.
When I go into schools and talk to junior high kids about Bigfoot, they love it. And you can be absolutely skeptical.
Right.
You can. They'll listen to you because the idea of Bigfoot just captures their little imaginations. And so you can say, that you're right. That's an interesting topic. It's a topic that we ought to look at and not just slough off. But we need to apply some critical thinking here. What about this and what about that? And you get them to thinking and so forth. So you can use these dubious topics to teach science and critical thinking. If people would do more of that, rather than that sort of debunking, nasty, dismissive kind of attitude, they would be more successful. And they would stick around to do it longer because they're having more fun, they're getting more rewards, they're making people smile and think a little bit. And when you can, I even had a priest who sent me a letter once saying that my book Looking for a Miracle was a wonderful gift, and he was not being sarcastic. It was like, if you can debunk this fraud or that, more power to you. And there are people like that. They may be in a minority, or you may have to find them, but they exist.
That almost makes sense from a priest, because you think they would want actual miracles and not the fraudulent ones.
You would think so, but some, having trouble finding the real McCoy, seem to be willing to satisfy. Oh, we're not saying it's authentic, but if it brings people to the true religion, well, how bad can it be? Well, pretty bad if you put it that way.
I looked back as somebody yelled. I don't know if you heard it. They're announcing that we have protesters standing outside So we have protesters now
So I
at
hear.
Skepticon 3.
But of course they wouldn't be protesting me.
No, right.
I'm far too nice to be protested. They're protesting these other people.
You didn't see the big Joe Nickel suck sign out there? You didn't see that one?
No, that's the other Joe Nickel. That's my evil twin.
Evil twin.
Yeah.
Joe, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure talking to
really
you.
appreciate you coming on, and keep up the good work. And we're looking forward to more from you as the years go on.
Thanks very much.
Thank you again. We really appreciate it. Joe Nickel, everybody. Thank you.